the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth, and the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so. Personally, I suspect highly unlikely to be arrested for whatever laws exist to contain free expression because of the undoubtedly privileged position that is afforded to those of a high public profile. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile. Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager arrested for calling the Church of Scientology a cult, or the cafe owner arrested for displaying passages from the Bible on a TV screen.
When I approached stand-up, my mission statement was to try and be as funny as you are in the pub. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So I didn't want it to be too, tricksy, or I played a slight persona because I always do that anyway. I do that. We do that here, So it was saying the wrong thing for comic effect, or being naughty, or trying to get people to laugh at things they didn't know they could. And I've always doubted taboo for that reason, because I think it's more exciting.
Sure.
You want to take the audience to a place it hasn't been before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and get them to laugh at things they didn't think they would enjoy.
Exactly, and this show is all about that. It's all about, there are no bad subjects for jokes. It depends what the joke is. We've talked about this a lot. And I talk about the most taboo subjects, and I discuss them, and then give an example of the joke. And by the end, they're cracking up, and they're knowing they get it. They sort of get, oh yeah. If you start off with a joke in that subject, it's, oh, why has he done that? Because they don't know where you're coming from. And that's the other thing about this tour. People know me now, so they know what I'm doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
absolutely.
a friend, like a mate knows you don't mean it. These 5,000 strangers every night, no, I don't mean it.
Right.
Do you know? So
they know what they're in for. They know what to expect.
They know what they're in for, and they love it. And it's almost like they're going, "Oh, he's always done this, but I don't think we quite got it before." Well, I think that's because I can justify it. I'm not one of these. I'm not one of these comedians who goes, "Oh, it was just a joke," because I don't really do that. I think it has to stand up on its own, comedic legs. And I talk about this, that, offence is often caused when people mistake the subject of a joke with the target. They don't look at the joke. They've been told this ridiculous dogma that some subjects shouldn't be joked about, which is a nonsense. And I get asked, is there anything you won't joke about? And I think, well, you're a journalist. Is there anything you won't write about?
Right.
It depends what you write. And it's funny, because whenever I've done a joke about a really contentious subject, or, and it's discussed on the radio the next day, I'm going, but you're talking about it.
Yeah.
You're talking about it, because they assume I'm coming it from the wrong direction. They assume that I'm They assume I'm punching down, and they assume I'm making fun of whatever the victim is in this joke, which isn't true. Because a joke about something doesn't have to be pro or anti. It can be either. It can be neither. It can punch nowhere. It can be a pun.
Right.
It doesn't. You have to take every single joke on its merit. Picked on the wrong person there, but I did a joke at the Golden Globes, and they were saying it was transphobic, and I said, why? And they said it was about a trans person. I said, well, that's like saying a joke about Bill Cosby is racist.
Right.
It depends what the joke is. It wasn't transphobic at all. The joke I told at the Golden Globes, I came out and I said, all the actors are looking at me all nervously, brilliant, and I said, relax, I'm going to be nice tonight. I've changed. Not as much as Bruce Jenner.
That's
obviously.
funny.
And I go, now Caitlyn Jenner, and what a year she's had, became a role model for trans people everywhere, bravely breaking down barriers and destroying stereotypes. She didn't do a lot for women drivers. So the subject of that joke is clearly stereotypes.
And by the way, the thing that people should, even if they're going to take umbrage with something, it should be like, wait a minute, wasn't that a thing? Somebody died in that car accident that he's referencing.
Yeah.
But nobody even picks up on that.
No, I discuss it. I say, let's not forget the target of the joke is a celebrity someone in their car.
Yeah. And they also said you dead named, Travis reminded me that you dead named.
That's it, I talk about that as well. Dead naming, which is ever saying that her old name and that she used to be a man, yeah. And then I say, but she was. And then I do the thing about she was in the Olympic Games, and I act out, you know. And so, and I say, you know, and I was second, you know, my second crime was saying that he'd changed, because they say, you know, people, that she hasn't changed, that she's always identified as a woman, and so that, you know, she had gender realignment. And I discuss it in the live. I discuss all the criticisms of me, and then I say my piece, because I think it can be funny to deconstruct, particularly when you're the butt of the joke, or you're, you know, and so I always try and keep it fair. I don't ever do a sleight of hand where I say something that's a lie or to make myself look better in a joke.
Right.
You know, I think that's really important. I think that, and then once you've done your best and you've explained it well, people are still going to make their own mind. They don't have to like it. They don't even have to get it. But someone not getting your joke isn't your problem. It's theirs. Brilliant. Why isn't it your responsibility to get the joke? Yeah. That's a great. And the other thing I get is whenever, like in the press, a joke of mine is discussed as being offensive, I don't mind that at all. But when they get the joke wrong, that drives me mad. I go, well, no, that's not the joke I said. That isn't a good joke. A joke should be perfect. Every word matters. It's like a cryptic crossword clue. Every word matters. It's a little piece of poetry, right? So if you get one of those things wrong, you can the whole joke. The answer is, again, it depends on the joke. I really break it down. It's so much fun. It's such a great platform to be able to put your side forward and discuss humour in a funny way. And so you're taking them along with you all the way. You're explaining. They're hearing every word from your side, and then it takes a long time to explain what humour is to someone, if they or freedom of speech, or this is the reason is the more terrible and emotive the subject, the harder it is to get over the hump about a joke about it.
Right.
Yeah.
We can joke about, you know, people joke about, and people get it. They go, you know, which is horrendous. But they can't take that personally, because they haven't personally been. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you do something that touches someone or a group of people, and it's, you know, it's very, very emotive. It's hard for them to get over that. The number of times people have seen my stand-up, and I've had one complaint. I did the first time I played Madison Square Garden. I got a complaint from a Jewish society saying, we loved the show, we loved all the we were however unhappy about a routine about Anne Frank. And they told me, I said, but you got the jokes about famine and cancer and AIDS, and you got those, you know. I said, I'm doing the same thing with her as I did with those things. I'm saying the wrong thing. And they went, oh yes, okay, we understand it. And sometimes you do need that. And I don't begrudge people because they're not attuned to. We think about these things every day. A 30-second joke, we've probably put 3 hours work into it. Do you know what I mean? Or thought about it, or introspected, or so. We are presenting them with a finished item, but that's the tip of the iceberg. And so sometimes they do have to get over there. It's hard to, by definition, to see your own blind spot, because everyone's got their thing they don't want to joke about. People say things, are you ever offended by things? I go, I'm offended every day. I'm offended by loads of things. You know, I'm not immune to being offended.
You just don't want a penalty imposed.
Well, exactly, yeah.
You avoid the things you're offended by.
Yeah, that's the other thing about today. People think that they have the right, because they don't want to hear something bad, that it's their right to shut you up, as opposed to it's their right not to listen. And that's the confusion as well. And it's not that I think I'm bulletproof, or I don't care, or they can't do anything about it. Although all those things are true. No. If I'm not breaking the law and they're not coming to my house, who cares? It's virtual, you know. It's not that. It's that I'm confident in that I've done right. I don't think I've done a really bad thing and I can get away with it. F you. I think, no, I've done a right thing here. I justify every one of my jokes as an okay thing to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying, because that doesn't make sense. I can't say, yeah, I do bad things, but so what? I wouldn't do them if I thought they were bad things. So I'm disagreeing with them that what I've done is a bad thing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally,
And
but
I
you-
try and get across to people that jokes about a bad thing isn't the same as the actual bad thing. It's not even condoning the bad thing. It could be anti the bad thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have satire and irony. Yeah, well, so I think sometimes it depends. Some people are just trolls. Some people just want to ruin your day. They get in the way. They jump in the way of a bullet and say, "Why are you shooting at me?"
Yeah,
And
people
so-
love to be martyrs.
Oh, they think
Yeah.
everything's personal. I don't even know they're following me. I don't know these people. I'm just tweeting, and they take it personally. They go, "Why are you tweet?" I'm not tweeting you. You've come to my house, knocked on my door, and said, "Why are you
Yeah.
talking to me?" Well, I'm not. So
When I heard of some of these more ludicrous offences and charges, I remembered that I had been here before in a fictional context. I once did a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News some years ago, and we did a sketch where Griff Rhys-Jones played Constable Savage, a manifestly racist police officer to whom I, as his station commander, is giving a dressing down for arresting a black man on a whole string of ridiculous, trumped-up and ludicrous charges. The charges for which Constable Savage arrested Mr. Winston Kadogo of 55 Mercer Road were these: walking on the cracks in the pavement, walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness, and one of my favourites, walking around all over the place. He was also arrested for urinating in a public convenience and looking at me in a funny way. Who would have thought that we would end up with a law that would allow life to imitate art so exactly? I read somewhere a defender of the status quo claiming that the fact that the gay horse case was dropped after the arrested man refused to pay the fine, and that the Scientology case was also dropped at some point during the court process, was proof that the law was working well, ignoring the fact that the only reason these cases were dropped was because of the publicity that they had attracted. The police sensed that ridicule was just around the corner and withdrew their actions. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not enjoy the oxygen of publicity, that weren't quite ludicrous enough to attract media attention? Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. You know, that isn't a law working properly. That is censoriousness of the most intimidating kind, guaranteed to have, as Lord Dear says, a chilling effect on free expression and free protest. Parliament's Joint Committee on Human Rights summarised, as you may know, this whole issue very well by saying, while arresting a protester for using threatening or abusive speech may, depending on the circumstances, be a proportionate response, we do not think that language or behaviour that is merely insulting should ever be criminalised in this way. The clear problem with the outlawing of insult is that too many things can be interpreted as such. Criticism is easily construed as insult by certain parties. Ridicule easily construed as insult. Sarcasm, unfavourable comparison, merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. And because so many things can be interpreted as insult, it is hardly surprising that so many things have been, as the examples I talked about earlier show. Although the law under discussion has been on the statute book for over 25 years, it is indicative of a culture that has taken hold of the programs of successive governments, that with the reasonable and well-intentioned ambition to contain obnoxious elements in society, has created a society of an extraordinarily authoritarian and controlling nature. That is what you might call the new intolerance, a new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. I am not intolerant, say many people, say many softly spoken, highly educated, liberal-minded people. I'm only intolerant of intolerance. And people tend to nod sagely and say, oh yes, wise words, wise words. And yet if you think about this supposedly inarguable statement for longer than 5 seconds, you realize that all it is advocating is the replacement of one kind of intolerance with another, which to me doesn't represent any kind of progress at all. Underlying prejudices, injustices, or resentments are not addressed by arresting people. They are addressed by the issues being aired, argued, and dealt with, preferably outside the legal process. For me, the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. As with childhood diseases, you can better resist those germs to which you have been exposed. We need to build our immunity to taking offence so that we can deal with the issues that perfectly justified criticism can raise. Our priority should be to deal with the message, not the messenger. As President Obama said in an address to the United Nations only a month or so ago, laudable efforts to restrict speech can become a tool to silence critics or oppress minorities. The strongest weapon against hateful speech is not repression, it is more speech. And that's the essence of my thesis, more speech. If we want a robust society, we need more robust dialogue, and that must include the right to insult or to offend. And even if, as Lord Dear says, the freedom to be inoffensive is no freedom at all. The repeal of this word in this clause will be only a small step, but it will, I hope, be a critical one in what should be a longer-term project to pause and slowly rewind a creeping culture of censoriousness. It is a small skirmish in the battle, in my opinion, to deal with what Sir Salman Rushdie refers to as the outrage industry. Self-appointed arbiters of the public good, encouraging media-stoked outrage to which the police feel under terrible pressure to react. A newspaper rings up Scotland Yard. Someone has said something slightly insulting on Twitter about someone who we think a national treasure. What are you going to do about it? And the police panic and they scrabble around and then grasp the most inappropriate lifeline of all, Section 5 of the Public Order Act, that thing where you can arrest anybody for saying anything that might be construed by anyone else as insulting. They don't seem to need a real victim. They need only to make the judgment that somebody could have been offended if they had heard or read what has been said. The most ludicrous degree of latitude. The storms that surround Twitter and Facebook comment have raised some fascinating issues about free speech, which we haven't really yet come to terms with. Firstly, that we all have to take responsibility for what we say, which is quite a good lesson to learn. But secondly, we've learned how appallingly prickly and intolerant society has become of even the mildest adverse comment. The law should not be aiding and abetting this new intolerance. Free speech can only suffer if the law prevents us from dealing with its consequences. I offer my wholehearted support to the Reform Section 5 campaign. Thank you very much.